Chapter 1. The Industrious Pilgrim, an exposition without which you might have felt unhappy. Christie Malry was a simple person. It did not take him long to realize that he had not been born into money, that he would therefore have to acquire it as best he could, that there were unpleasant, and to him unacceptable, penalties for acquiring it by those methods considered to be criminal by society, that there were other methods not, somewhat arbitrarily, considered criminal by society, and that the course most likely to benefit him would be to place himself next to the money, or at least next to those who were making it. He therefore decided that he should become a bank employee. I did tell you Christie was a simple person. At the interview formally granted to all new employees by one of the bank's general managers at head office, Christie's minimal qualifications were laid bare, his appearance scrutinized, and his nervousness remarked on. Then he was asked why he wished to join the bank. Christie was lost, could not think of his answer. One was shortly supplied for him. Most young men joined the bank for the security, for the very liberal pension, which amounted to 2/3 of whatever salary the employee was receiving at retiring age. And this retiring age itself was, as an act of generosity, 60, and not 65. Not only was Christie simple, he was young, too, a few weeks past his 17th birthday at the time of this interview. Christie was silent even at the information that he had only 43 and not 48 years to wait before he was free. The whole impetus of the interview was towards his providing a standard set of correct answers, or of losing points for wrong answers. Did Christie have to play? The general manager made him very much aware of his power. What Christie thought, however, and how privileged we are to be able to know it, was that he would consider himself to be a failure if he had to depend on a bank pension at 60, and that it would show a remarkable lack of spirit even to be thinking, at the age of 17, of pensions and retirement. The truth that he was interested in placing himself next to some money seemed not to be required in the context. The offices of a general manager of one of the few national banks is not the place to exeleutherostomize. From this you might think that Christie was mad for money, as some are mad for sex, but that is not so. Christie, like almost all of us, had to think of earning a living first. The economics dictate to an extent sometimes not fully realized the real as distinct from the imaginary, possibilities open to one to move in other directions. But be assured that sex was one of the things for which Christie wanted money. Sex was always, particularly at this age, one of the things he thought most about, had very often in mind. Christie was accepted into the service of the bank, despite his inadequacy at providing the correct answers. His failure to give any answers at all did not count against him as much as a succession of wrong answers, and for reasons Christie was just about to experience for himself, the bank had difficulty in holding on to recruits of his age, and therefore deliberately took on far more than it knew would stay the long course to early retirement and 2/3 of an honest penny. So Christie started at the Hammersmith branch, conveniently near his home, of this nationally known concern, one Monday morning in October. From the comparative shelter of his school, of which I shall probably not tell you much, it was a painful transposition. Christie had expected to have to work hard, and to find the work both uncongenial and menial at first. What he did not expect was the atmosphere in which he was expected to work, and which was created by his fellow employees or colleagues, as they were in the habit of calling one another. This atmosphere was acrid with frustration, boredom, and jealousy, black with acrimony, pettiness, and bureaucracy. It was partly a result of this obsolescence of the premises in which the bank had set out to carry on business. For despite the modernity of computer-based accounts, and to every colleague his own personal adding machine, the original investment in mahogany, marble, and brass had been so great as to make it impossible to sweep it away and think about banking all over again. In this atmosphere, Christie quickly became bitter and unhappy himself, nor did he feel himself to be nearer, in any sense that mattered, money. His job consisted of listing the amounts of checks on an adding machine, and at the end of the day agreeing his total with that of the cashiers. 2 days out of 3, it did not agree, and on these days he had to go through the checks again, calling the amounts to a girl who checked them on the list until they found the error. Sometimes they could shorten the process by looking for an exact amount that had been missed or included twice, but this was rare. Usually it would be a variation in the decimal point, one way or the other, which would throw the whole thing out. Very rarely indeed, it would be the cashier who had made an error and not Christie. The girl's name was Margaret. She made the tea. Christie was not as lowly as that. On the other hand, he was not allowed to open the post in the morning, while he was allowed to seal it at night. Opening and sealing are not the same. Christie was quite clear as to his preference, but there was no chance of his being allowed to exercise it. The manager of the branch Christie most infrequently saw. He remained in his office and summoned underlings. Christie did not rank high enough to be an underling in this sense. The chief accountant and the assistant accountant hardly noticed Christie either, except to lambast him icily on those occasions when totals did not agree, or when he, as often happened, committed some other banking solecism. The clerks and cashiers formed a close, median group. They were mature men and women, tiny. The only colleague apart from Margaret who spoke to Christie at times, other than when he had made a mistake, was Joan. Joan was 19, plain, androgynous, and Christie's immediate superior. She it was who showed him how to operate it had been her, adding machine. She who showed him where he could have coffee in the mornings and tea in the afternoons. She with whom, as time went on, and it did, in this case, go on for a short while, he could share a small joke at the expense of a cashier who had, say, £10 more than he should have done at the end of the working day. Christie was invited to join the Staff Association. He understood that there was a real trade union in banking, but that the banks also ran their own and called them staff associations. Even at this politically unaware stage of his life, Christie could see through that one. The invitation was given an added irony by the fact that it was made by the man most likely to cause grievance, for which Christie might approach a staff association to seek redress, the chief accountant. Nevertheless, Christie joined. Again, the invitation posed a question which expected only a correct answer, and silence was not this time acceptable. So a small sum was deducted each week from Christie's wages and placed to the credit of the Staff Association account. Christie's wages themselves were minimal. It was explained to him that this was to compensate for the utter security of his job. Other companies and institutions were fly-by-night compared. A man might work for them for 40 years and then find himself on the street, unemployed. What a prospect. Christie still found it hard to live. He looked forward to his 18th birthday, when a small rise was promised, if not due. When it came, he found it was cancelled out with a bookkeeping preciseness and copperplate neatness by an increase, now he counted as adult, in the amount of his contributions to National Health Insurance and the Staff Association. At Christmas there was a bonus, which, in Christie's case, amounted to enough for him to buy his mother a bottle of sherry. Christie was there for Christmas. It so happened he had not yet acquired sufficient courage to give and serve notice. This was to come, in the spring. As for the money, Christie was soon certain that he was not appreciably nearer to it. Indeed, he very soon experienced that curious distancing effect felt by honest persons in a similar situation. The money he saw in piles and sacks was virtually a different thing from those notes and coins that he had in his own pockets. And those paper transactions with which he partially dealt did not make much real sense either. He would think hard about why J. Seminole Limited had paid £53.48 to the firm of solicitors who were tenants of the chambers above the bank, and of course within the bank it was not possible for him to find out. It made, he thought, a mockery of the oath of secrecy as to matters concerning clients' business he had been required to sign on joining the bank. No doubt the manager knew secrets, no doubt the chief accountant was privy to some of them as well, but none were allowed to filter down as far as Christie. The nearest he came to a secret was in overhearing the cashiers and clerks discussing some share value which had oscillated oddly, and by the time bank clerks were talking about such a thing loudly enough for anyone to overhear, it was no longer a secret anyway. So Christie thought again, and in his direct way he merely modified his approach. He decided the way to move nearer to money was to become an accountant, in order to see where the money came from, how it was manipulated, and where it went. A simple man, as I have too often said. Christie saw his move in two parts. The first was to pass up the sheltering lifelong security offered by the bank, and to seek his fortune in one of those rash new companies which had been established less than a couple of centuries. The other was to embark on a course of study leading to examinations which, if passed, would give him a professional qualification as an accountant. In the spring, Christie accordingly served out his month's notice at the bank, well survived the open contempt of the colleagues, who clearly thought he was a waster, or something equally as old-fashioned as the bank's facade, and particularly the dismay of Joan, who never spoke to him once during the month. And there was no coin collection made for Christie, no farewell cakes with the last afternoon tea, no warm handshakes or promises to meet in the near future over lunch or a drink. But Christie had learned a lot at the bank. It was hardly apparent to him at the time. It would be of great value later on. Christie's new job was also in Hammersmith, and not far from the bank, as it happened. Tappers had been manufacturing sweets and cakes for a mere 83 years, and they were short of an invoice clerk after all that time. Christie was the only respondent to their advertisement. He thought it might be just what he needed. In the evenings, Christie would work at the correspondence course in accountancy for which he had enrolled. Almost at once, he was made aware of the system of double entry, which was, though some time later, to give him his great idea and influence the course of his life so radically. Although evidence of some form of recording accounts is found in many older civilizations, the first man known to have codified the method called double-entry bookkeeping was Fra Luca Bartolomeo Pacioli, a Tuscan monk and contemporary of Leonardo da Vinci. Pacioli included his account of accounts in a much larger mathematical work, Summa de Arithmetica, Geometria Proportioni et Proportionalita, which was printed in Venice in 1494, and therefore qualifies as incunabula. It is now most easily available in a translation published by the Institute of Bookkeepers and Related Data Processing Limited, to whom I am myself a debtor for permission to quote. The exposition of this novel would not be complete without an extract from this prime source. To the respectful subjects of the Duke of Urbino, so that they may have all the rules of mercantile order they may need, I have prepared another particular treatise, very necessary to compile. The present treatise will serve all their needs with regard to accounts and recording, and for this reason only do I insert it. I therefore intend to give sufficient rules to enable them to keep all their accounts and books in an orderly manner. As is known, 3 things are necessary to one who wishes diligently to carry on business. Of these, the most important is cash, or any other substantial power, without which the carrying on of business is very difficult. It has happened that many, entering business with nothing but good faith, have yet carried on big business, and through their credit, faithfully served, they have attained to greater wealth. In our conversations with persons throughout Italy, we have come across many of these, and in the great republics the word of a good merchant is considered sufficient, and oaths are taken on it, saying, "It is the word of a real merchant." This cannot be admiration, as Catholically everybody is saved by faith, without which it is impossible to please God. The second thing looked for in business is to be a good accountant and sharp bookkeeper, and to arrive at this, as we have seen above, we have regular rules and canons necessary to each operation, so that any diligent reader can understand all by himself. If one does not understand this well, the following would serve him in vain. The third and last thing necessary is that all one's affairs be arranged in good order, so that one may get, without loss of time, all particulars as to the debit and also the credit of all of them, as business does not deal with anything else. This is very useful, because it would be impossible to conduct business without due order of recording, for without rest, merchants would always be in great mental trouble. Therefore, I have arranged this treatise wherein I give the method of recording all kinds of entries, proceeding chapter by chapter, and as I cannot put down all that ought to be written on the subject, nevertheless an industrious pilgrim will be able to apply it to any other required case.